Hello and welcome to my series of conversations with men and women whose ideas, vision and philosophy help define our contemporary world. My guest today is an outstanding entrepreneur, an inventor, and has had substantial influence in policy making in India in several fields. He's been, amongst other things perhaps, best known for his impact and his catalytic role in the telecommunications revolution in India. But he's here on this program in his incarnation as the head of the National Knowledge Commission, a special committee appointed to advise and make recommendations to the Prime Minister of India. I'm delighted to welcome Sam Pitroda.
Thank you.
Welcome back to the program.
Thank you.
You've been through this phase of sort of a somewhat turbulent time with the Knowledge Commission, certainly in the public domain with controversies and resignations. But putting all that behind now, you have moved rapidly, continued to move rapidly forward, as is your wont, and I think is something that we associate very much with you. I was going through the materials of what you have been looking at, and there is such a diverse portfolio of initiatives and ideas and suggestions, but maybe we could just go back to the basics and look at this very notion of a knowledge commission. We've had committees that look at education, we've had committees that look at libraries, we look at the commissions that have looked at traditional knowledge and how that can be preserved. But here's an all-encompassing umbrella. So give us the philosophical framework of what you're looking at.
The whole idea of Knowledge Commission came out of discussions we had at the National Advisory Council, headed by Sonia Gandhi. I was asked to look at education and science and technology. As I started to understand a little more, I realized that there is more to vertical aspect of education, science and technology than to the needs of India in the 21st century. When I look back and see what we had done in telecom in mid-80s, I realized that it took us almost 20 years to see visible impact on the country. Then the question was, what is that we do today which will have visible impact on the country 20, 25 years down the road? Then we realized that we need to look at broader concept and really focus on building knowledge institutions and infrastructure to help India move forward in 21st century. So when we look at this, we essentially focus on 550 million young below age of 25. 2, disparities in the society which hurt all of us. As soon as you and I walk out of this kind of environment, go on the street and it bothers us. And there is no reason for this disparity. Then rural development, we have been talking for 50 years to really get our rural villages out of poverty, build infrastructure. So when you look at these major challenges like that, you find that there has to be a common thread, and that common thread really is knowledge. We look at knowledge from 5 different perspectives. 1, access to knowledge. How do you get to knowledge? It's out there somewhere, but who gets there? 2, concepts. How do you create knowledge concepts? 3, knowledge creation. How do you create your own knowledge? And how do you protect your own knowledge? 4, applications. How do you apply knowledge? And 5, how do you change governance and improve public services through better knowledge? So there are 5 broad concepts. In each of these, there are areas. It's layer after layer after layer. It's like peeling onion. You peel 2 layers and you think you got it, and you got to go on peeling until you get tears in your eyes. Then you realize that it's a complex process. Take, for example, access. In access, you have to worry about literacy, libraries, networks, portals, languages, translations, reservations, quotas, affirmative action programs. All of this has to be packaged properly to improve access.
Isn't there a fear that with such a large canvas and with so much detailing that you're doing, much of it is going to get lost, is going to get diluted. This whole aspect of the need, the imperative in a democracy with the political environment that you're working in, is to press certain key buttons that will catalyze change, as you were able to do so dramatically with the telecommunications revolution. So there were these sort of priorities, and then it expanded onto a much larger canvas.
Very good question.
So what are the key buttons
Very good
that you want to press right now?
I think one key button that we really need to push is to create knowledge network infrastructure. So we can reach out to every corner of the country. Today, technology has changed the way we work, the way we learn, the way we entertain our people, the way we govern. Okay? So if we can set up integrated knowledge network in terms of high capacity, high bandwidth, modern infrastructure, highways of the future, to which we can connect our libraries, our schools, our teachers, our government, our hospitals, our agricultural institutions, then the flow of knowledge would be simplified. So that's the crux of the matter. Then you worry about how do you improve libraries, how do you improve universities, how do you get better teacher, how do you change your courses, how do you get more students in PhD programs. Yeah. The bottom line then is the knowledge network. So anybody, anywhere, any place can have access to any knowledge.
This is a continuation of your work with the telecom revolution in many ways, but ultimately it is there is a relationship to the quality of knowledge that is disseminated through these networks, and also the ability to process knowledge.
Sure.
And in India we have sort of frequently associated knowledge with a larger vision of shall we just say, use the word wisdom, as opposed to sort of nitpicking knowledge. And I think that we have struggled with the notion of vocational education, for example. And we had Professor Jagdish Bhagwati on the program, and he said, one of the problems with vocational education is that vocations change so rapidly. Absolutely. That through this whole process of inculcating knowledge, we have to develop the ability in people, in our young people, to learn. Absolutely. To reinvent themselves, to train the mind.
Absolutely.
And very often in processes that government and policy makers look at, the process of training the mind to train itself is excluded.
Well, there are
seminal.
Yeah, but there are several issues you have raised. Basically, one is that of mindset. Two is that of change. These are big ideas. Change is constant. At my age, I'm close to 65. I have so much to learn. I realize, my God, there is such a little piece out of all the things that I want to know. I really know. I have no time to read. Okay. At one time when I graduated from college, I thought, my God, there is everything that had to be learned, I have learned. And then you realize there is very little that you have learned. It's like when you look at all the patents issued, you think there is nothing to invent, and every year there are 2 million patents. Okay? So knowledge changes all the time. It's a dynamic process. You have to recognize that you got to change. You got to change as a society, you got to change as people, you got to change as family, change as business. And I think Dr. Bhagwati is very right in saying that we don't emphasize that change in our vocational education. Carpenter today who comes to fix something at your home brings the same set of tools that his great grandfather used, but he doesn't realize that the tools have changed. We have not given him new tools to do his job. So these are very complex issues.
There's also this notion of moving beyond knowledge as information, so that the mind is trained not just to renew itself in terms of skills, but as you were saying, implying at least, that in terms of ideas, in terms of concepts, and our whole system of encouraging, cultivating, imparting knowledge doesn't encourage that. So as the Knowledge Commission, what are some of the elements that you're looking at to go down to the fundamentals of our attitude, of our relationship to knowledge? And then the detailing that you're so brilliantly doing will begin to receive that catalyst if we can accept those basic principles. What are those principles for you?
See, first one is that we do recognize that this is for the young whose future depends on knowledge. I don't expect to change 70, 50, 60-year-old person who is locked into that. In general, there are people with exceptions. But when you talk of people who are 10-year, 15-year, 20-year, 25-year-old, their future depends on knowledge, and they recognize that.
What are the elements that you're looking at to inculcate these values, these mental attitudes amongst the young? Attitude.
Give them hope. Give them hope, give them vision. Vision that is far beyond what they have been able to articulate.
How do you do that?
I think you talk about it, you discuss it, you set an example.
Only one Sam Pitroda.
I can do whatever I can do. I'm just a little guy. But there are lots of
So how do you institutionalize and structure this and build it into the process? Because I so completely agree, with what you're saying. But I think the real challenge, and I fear for India, is that we have committees, we come up with wonderful ideas and suggestions, but the spirit that people like you embody and impart to those recommendations is lost. And then we quibble about details and the distinction between quotas and affirmative action. I mean, that's a separate issue and a very important
one. Very important issue.
I mean, not to dilute that. Absolutely. But I think the spirit is lost, and that's what I'm concerned about.
I think we need minimum critical mass of change agents in this country. There are change agents isolated, trying to do their own little thing in some little corner. We really don't have minimum critical mass of change agents. We have a huge mass of people who say, we believe in status quo. If we create another group here where 100, 200, 5,000 people say we are for change in every aspect, not that we throw away all that we have, but we recognize good things in our past, but we can't get hung up. We got to move on. We want to hold on to our past so very tightly.
But how does a change agent such as you create more change agents?
Talk and network with people like you and request people like you to take our message across.
You must be pleased at the huge increase in the allocation in the recent budget on education.
Yes.
And it's the old adage that, it's not just about making more money available. And your genius really in the telecom revolution was, your vision. That it had, there was a potential for the PCO in the village, that you could take it there, and the public-private partnership, and to have a kind of both sensitive and empowering regulatory authority. And I think the manner in which the regulatory authority has worked has been one of the cornerstones of the success of the telecom revolution, because they have not just seen themselves as, we regulate, which means we circumscribe, we limit, we manage, we withhold, but it has looked at the balancing the consumer's interests with that. So that was the core.
We need to do the same thing idea. In many areas.
Exactly. So now when we look at education, you have tread on, in a sense, of many toes and evoked a lot of resistance because, the University Grants Commission, many of the institutions which currently manage higher education feel very threatened by your sort of more open-ended, laissez-faire, if I may describe it, approach to restructuring knowledge and education. So what is that? Is there a core vision idea here that will be the catalyst to making all these ideas, the detailing work?
Today we must recognize that we live in a globalized world. It's a different world than the world we lived in 20 years ago. Okay? In a globalized world, a country of 1 billion people have to think very differently. We are a very big, significant part of the world. Okay. So I can't look at it in terms of isolation. Okay. 2, governments have not been able to deliver in the past, and we should accept that. Okay. Governments have not delivered on many things. Education, basic education, I mean, we have been talking about it for 40, 50 years, not been able to deliver on literacy, water, sanitation. I can go on and on and on. Okay? And there is no criticism here on anybody. We must accept realities of life. When you talk like this, people say, oh, you are attacking somebody. It's not an attack on anybody. Okay? It means that we require more private participation. We have seen the results in telecom. So we got to privatize as much as possible. We got to bring in resources from many different places. We got to change our methodology. We got to restructure our organizations. So I look at things from the viewpoint of what is good for India, not what is good for this department, that organization, that structure. I don't care. That's not my job. I'm not looking at vertical silos. I got to look at future. And in the process, if people feel hurt, too bad. That's not my job.
You're watching A Conversation with Sam Pitroda. We'll be right back after a short break. Don't go away. Welcome back to a continuing conversation with Sam Pitroda, who currently heads the National Knowledge Commission, a commission to which he brings a huge personal success story in terms of his own work, his own personal career, and his contribution and commitment to India. I guess it would be a failing of this program if we didn't press some of the key buttons of the initiatives that you're looking at, and just to detail them. Because I fear, as often happens in our community, in our country, that you have a little controversy blow up, and then you think that you have been writing letters to the Prime Minister, making recommendations, and there's almost a feeling that the work of the Commission is over. You're about midway, into this.
Not only that, but after we finish our recommendations, there is a lot more work in implementation.
Correct. So you are sort of midway, through this process. Yeah. And what would you think are, if you would detail some of the most significant, the most important recommendations to emerge at this time? Perhaps we could start and put behind us this whole issue of affirmative action as opposed to quotas. Sure. And perhaps you would explain to us, what the distinction is, why this controversy, and you've had two very eminent people, resign on those grounds. What was the difference in perception? Perhaps dare I call it a misunderstanding, perhaps?
Okay, first of all, I must emphasize the fact that we are thankful to the government and people of India for giving us this great opportunity to reshape knowledge institutions. It's a historical opportunity. You don't get it just by asking. So Prime Minister backed it up. He was courageous in saying, I want to set up a National Knowledge Commission. No one in the world has set up a Knowledge Commission yet. All over the world, people appreciate what India has been able to do. This is really visionary approach to knowledge. Again, whenever you do things like this, people wonder as to how this will impact their existing jobs, positions, processes. So they begin to get threatened in their own mind, because the idea itself says something different has to happen. I get calls from experts at MIT, Harvard saying, what a great concept. How do we capitalize on this? If we worry about petty things, we lose this window of opportunity to bring about generational change. So we can't worry about petty things, but at the same time, we have to work on it. Okay. So one, we are looking at a big idea in which education is one, in which reservation is little piece. But then it's very important because it affects millions of people. Okay. No one says that we should not take care of poor, economically deprived, low caste, disparities. We are all for it. You cannot be an Indian and not be touched by the disparity. It is not the privilege of the politicians only that they are concerned about poor. We are equally concerned about poor. You don't have to be poor to be concerned about poor. Okay? It has to come from your heart and not from your mind. Yeah. So when we talk of reservations, we believe that we must give opportunities to everybody, irrespective of your background, caste, color, religion, all that. Okay. But how do you do it? So the whole reservation debate got stuck at what do we do to the best of the best institutions. We said, look, there should be reservations in schools and colleges, no problem. But leave IITs, IIMs to themselves. These are the institutions of excellence. Don't mess it up. Give them direction, don't give them numbers. Because director of IIT and IIM is equally concerned about disparity. He is not stupid. We have trusted him to build the best of the best talent for the country. Trust him with this idea to manage diversity. Leave him alone. That's where the discussion was. People misunderstand these ideas and blow it out of proportion. I am from OBC. I didn't even know that. I'm son of a carpenter. My father had 4th grade education. People say, how could you be OBC and be against OBC? I say, it's not about OBC or against OBC. It's not about me. It's about the country going forward. I think I find that in our country, people are always asking questions. What is in it for me? What it is for my community? What is in it for my neighbor, my relative, my family? As opposed to saying, I need to sacrifice. Only through sacrifice, I would see what is good for the country.
Not getting, obviously, as you have alluded yourself, the issue is much larger and more complex. And I think that to move on, because sort of your time with us is much too valuable. But I think this is an important discussion and debate on its own. Let's look at this issue of the privatization of education, particularly higher education, which there's also a great deal of anxiety. There is the fear that when there is privatized education, the emphasis is on knowledge as a consumable commodity by the students, and not necessarily the cultivation of knowledge that has other values. I alluded to wisdom, to shall we say liberal education, to other things, to other aspects which are not immediately marketable, or information or insight or skills that do not respond to the marketplace. How do you address that? You're looking to move to 1,500 universities, 50 national universities. You're calling for free land, and you're calling for the utilization of land for commercial purposes. I don't want to go into the details of that, but there's obviously a very major thrust there, and the government doesn't have the resources to make it happen. They will have to go to the private sector. How do we ensure this balance in education?
See, same questions were raised 20 years ago when we were talking about privatization of telecom. These are all known questions with known answers. You got to go through the process. Okay. Privatization is critical to bringing resources, additional resources. People want to put money in education. Some want to do it for profit, most want to do it for non-profit. Yeah. Some want to focus on engineering education so they can employ people. Others want to go into liberal arts education so they can be leaders of tomorrow. Okay. We need all of that. We need this, that, everything else, and some more. Yeah. Privatization is inevitable. We have had private colleges in the country. We have seen the results. Yeah. Mostly, we have had good experience. Some we have had bad experience. But some bad go with lot of good. The answer is not policing it to a point saying, look, we will not allow. Because government education has not been able to deliver. If government education had been able to deliver, then we will not have a debate on privatization. Yeah. Since government education has not delivered, doesn't have the resources, and private people are interested in it, why not to try?
That interview that I was referring to with the Jagdish Bhagwati, he also said The unfortunate truth is that private enterprise is driven by the basist, which means the most fundamental instincts of greed and to make money of private enterprise that goes into whether it's education or I think the Amartya Sens and the Jagdish Bhagwatis of this world are pleading for social sector spending, and that you can't just abdicate this and surrender.
We are not saying don't. Yeah. No. That goes without saying.
Because I think even in countries like the United States, where you have a lot of private education, it isn't all commercially driven, because there are huge trusts, there are donations, contributions by alumni, which form the basis of those institutions. But we haven't yet seen in India a tradition of the kind of philanthropy that would make that possible. I mean, Indian business still wants its pound of flesh when they put in.
Yeah, but you must also recognize that Indian money is quite new. There weren't too many rich people in India 20 years ago. Now there are billionaires. They never heard of billionaires before. The biggest company in India 25 years ago was, a few hundred crores. So this is new rich. It will take time. In America also, it took 50 years before rich people decided that it's about time to start investing in philanthropy. Some of the new rich are very insecure. They want more and more from the society and hold on to it for their children, their great-grandchildren. When the next generation of rich come into play, they'll be more secure. They said, I don't have to hold on to all this. Then they will give. But that process is going to take time. So don't expect first generation of rich to give. It don't happen that way.
I would love for this conversation to go on, because it's a wonderful learning experience. But just tell me, in conclusion, perhaps, that Sam Pitroda, the man with the passion for telecommunication, the passion for inventing things, the patents that you hold, and the passion for knowledge, and doing something for through the Knowledge Commission. What is your next passion? You move from one to the other, and you do a great job with each one of them. Is there a passion, another passion waiting on the horizon to express itself?
No, I just feel that I want my journey to be interesting. I don't have big ambitions in life. I'm okay. I'm happy. I'm a little guy. I'm not very rich. I'm not very smart. I'm not very capable, but I'm okay. I'm happy with myself. I mean that. I have great children. I have a great wife I've been married to for over 40 years. And I have a normal life. Okay? I'm also a normal human being like everybody else. I also know that I'm going to die. I will have an end like everybody else. My end may be, because now I'm 65. It may be nearer than earlier. So I got to make best out of it. I enjoy the journey, and I want to have good time.
Well, Mr. Pitroda, thank you. We celebrate your journey, and I think it helps us all in many ways. Thank you very much, sir. This has been a great pleasure.
Have a great night.